Thank you for joining the Keen Intuition podcast, where I intend to share my stream of consciousness with y'all on any given day. This is a What Are You Think Keen segment, aside from the main podcast, because over the weekend, a big thing happened. Basically, I'm a pretty big basketball fan, sports fan. I think I mentioned that to y'all before, but football and basketball are probably my favorite sports, so I'm a big Detroit Pistons fan and Detroit Lions fan in football. But in basketball in particular, when this scandal came out over the weekend, or maybe at the end of last week, involving betting, sports betting, and gambling in particular, in specific, in general, I should say, involving several NBA players in different sets of circumstances. I just wanted to do a mini episode about that because what were they thinking? And the main person that was involved in part of the scandal was Chauncey Billups, which Detroit Pistons, championship, big fan, all that kind of stuff. So his portion involved poker games, and they were talking about all these different types of items that they were using, smart glasses and sensors and like all this other stuff, basically in poker games in order to, I guess, enrich whoever he was working with. I don't know. Let me say too, before I get too far, part of why I just want to do this as a What Are You Thinking and not a full podcast is because this is a developing story. So they haven't, like, people have been indicted, and so there's going to be a trial, and details will come out at some point and all that kind of stuff. So we don't really know the extent of everything that happened yet. This is all rumors at this point, other than the indictments that were made and the charges that are being pressed. But for me, I'm like, wow, that came out of nowhere. But I guess it didn't come out of nowhere because some of these investigations, especially when it gets to the FBI level, goes on for years and years sometimes. So when I see Kash Patel up there with a bunch of the people that were surrounding him in that initial press conference, I'm like, bruh, yeah, you're the face of it right now, and that's why all them people were probably up there trying to make, get their faces out there. But this likely has been going on for a couple years, or at least the investigation. So he wasn't even involved in it. So yeah, you want to stunt for the gram, as they say. Anyways, the other part was involving insider betting, which is probably, I mean, I guess anything illegal is bad, but probably seen as worse for the sports leagues. In baseball, Pete Rose got kicked out for, basically similar type stuff. But, and again, we don't know the extent of what these folks did. But basically, it was two of the players that are now former NBA players, and saying that going back to when they were active, Terry Rozier and Damon Jones, and I think Terry Rozier is former. I get mixed up on whether or not one of them are still playing. But anyways, they were basically saying that information was being shared from them in order to enrich whoever they were working with and make their odds better when they're betting. So when that popped up, that got me to thinking, because what are you thinking? What are some other basketball related scandals that came up that involved gambling? One that I pulled up, and I got three of them that I'm gonna share with you. Went all the way back to 1950 when the City College of New York went 17-5 in the regular season, and then won 7 consecutive games over top 15 teams, and then won the NIT and NCAA tournaments. They had a bit of a scandal going, like, apparently they were pretty good because they were winning, and then they had to go further by trying to make additional money for people. And you got to think back to that time too, because there was obviously no NIL, because that just came within the last like 4 or 5 years. The players were not getting paid, except for maybe if they were getting scholarships at that time. Coaches definitely weren't multimillionaires. They were probably getting a good salary, but who knows if they were getting enough to actually pay their, live lavishly like these coaches are today, where they're getting multi-million-dollar salaries per year. So I'm not saying that they had a reason to do the stuff, but you can see probably why they would try to get some extra money on top of whatever they were getting. So another one happened in 1979 with Boston College. Several of the players uh, participated or worked alongside mobsters in order to shave points, basically. So, like you see on these sports apps now, you can bet on the spread and all that kind of stuff. So they were basically making the spread come true. And again, 1979, money was not in college basketball yet. That was like right as the Magic Johnson and Larry Bird thing was kind of happening. So I think at that time, college basketball games were probably still on a tape delay. They, you know, I know NBA games were until sometime in the 80s or at the beginning of the 80s on a tape delay, so you couldn't even see the championship game live and stuff like that. So there was really no money. The first NBA salary that was $1 million, I believe, was in the early 80s, and obviously NIL happened, like I said, a couple years ago in college. So they weren't getting money like that, except there were, I'm sure, some places were probably giving them money on the side and boosters and all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, they uh, got together and started shaving points, and that's basically what happened in that situation. And then the latest one that I remember uh, directly was the Tim Donaghy situation in the NBA, where Tim Donaghy was betting on games that he officiated. So he's out here making certain calls and then betting on those games as well. And obviously, this is insider knowledge for him. So he was making bets knowing, okay, I'm going to call a technical, or this person's going to foul out, or such and such is going to have so many traveling calls, or whatever the case was at the time. So that was pretty big because it put the NBA in a bad light. And it's crazy because at that time, the NBA was not just coming off of, but like in the mid to late 80s, there was a big issue in the NBA with like drug use, and Len Bias happened. It was cocaine and all that kind of stuff until they tried to clean the league up, and that was like David Stern's watch before he passed away and all that stuff, when he was the commissioner, before Adam Silver, who's the current commissioner. So, and Adam Silver, he's gonna have to deal with some stuff. So I don't know. I saw one statement where he was basically like, it's unfortunate that we're having to deal with this, but I haven't seen anything substantial come out. Although I do know the NBA had done its own investigation on at least some of the stuff that was going on and couldn't really find anything. And people are like, well, the NBA should have been working in conjunction with the FBI and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, they probably could have done that, but I don't think that's how those investigations work. Normally, the sports league will try to do their investigation, and then whether they do or don't find something, they'll dish out punishments, and then it'll get kicked out up to the actual court system, and then that'll be a separate set of punishments or whatever the case is. So, anyways, that's my thought on that. Y'all could, let me know if I'm wrong or right, but that it seems like that's what I've seen happen in these situations. So, again, it got me to thinking about all this stuff, and where my thoughts took me was especially in the Chauncey Billups situation, because I'm a Chauncey Billups fan, but even in the situation with the other folks that were involved, when they start mentioning the mafia and literally talking about La Cosa Nostra, and like literally on the feed and the crawl at the bottom of the screen when I'm seeing the story pop up, when I'm flipping through the news networks, because I try to look at all of them: CNN, MSNBC, Fox, Newsmax, and BBC sometimes. And there are a couple others like CBS and NBC and all that stuff, or CBS and ABC. But I try to go through all of them to see how they're reporting on things. The minute I start seeing La Cosa Nostra and mafia and mob ties and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, wow, what's really going on with this? So, but when I saw that, my thoughts went to, I wonder if there's some type of extortion going on here, or if some of these folks are being blackmailed or being coerced in some way. Because in my random work everyday life, 9 to 5 life, I'm like, there's nothing that, even in my life, whether, and it's people I'm sure watching this who live paycheck to paycheck and all that kind of stuff, just like the rest of us. Like that, being in that situation wouldn't push me to doing something as illegal as that, because you run the risk of jail time, being incarcerated, having to pay fines, having your name plastered across the news like theirs are. So now, regardless of what facts come out, people are thinking of you a certain way. So your public image, and these people are, their life is based on partially on public images, especially Chauncey Billups, because he's the coach of the team. He's been suspended from coaching of the Sacramento Kings and all that kind of stuff. So your public image is part of the equation when it comes to this. So, um, having that in jeopardy and all that kind of stuff, like me as a regular worker be at doing my work, like I wouldn't be trying to go down this route, and unless something was being done that caused me to go down that route. And then the other part of that is these people, again, Chauncey Billups and even the other ones, Terry Rozier and Damon Jones, these are multimillionaires. Even if you have to enter the bench, the base salary is going to make you a millionaire in the NBA. So you have enough money to not need to go this route, unless you're being coerced somehow, or if you have a gambling problem, because gambling addiction is a thing. And addiction in general is a thing, but specifically gambling addiction when it comes to this stuff. And I don't think any of the leagues, including the NBA, including ESPN, including all these outlets that are railing against them without the trial having happened yet, I don't think they're anytime you turn on a podcast, anytime you turn on a sports show, in between some news shows, you see a commercial about a betting app. FanDuel, or ESPN has their own ESPN Bet, like actual shows where all they do is show the odds and the who's out. And going back to when they started in all these leagues, when they started instituting the who's on the injured list and all that kind of stuff, like, so that's to give people. I mean, yeah, maybe the other team needs to get prepared to play against this person or not. But to me, a lot of that stuff was instituted to give bettors a heads up on, Magic Johnson's not playing today, so expect the Bulls to do A, B, C, and D. Or, the rebounds might be better because James Worthy's not playing, or, Dennis Rodman is suspended for a game. So the Trailblazers are going to do A, B, C, and D. So I feel like a lot of them are not helping their case by inviting all this gambling type stuff into their environments. Because, like I said, you can't even turn on a show now on any platform and not see one or two gambling things. Yeah, they talk about, if you have a gambling problem, you might want to get help or whatever. Just like at the smoking commercials they used to have, smoking can cause cancer or whatever. But to me, that whisper at the end, that doesn't really dissuade anybody from gambling, especially in this younger generation where people are tied to their phones all day. You have the casino right there in your hand all day. You don't have to go to Las Vegas and in a bunch of states where this stuff is legal now. You have it right in your hand. You can make prop bets. You can make, the over under. You can bet on that. Like it's some table tennis league in the Ukraine with grandmothers. You could bet on that, like who's gonna, get as many slams or whatever. Like you bet on pretty much anything at this point. There's somebody betting that I'm gonna keep rambling right now, probably, right? That's watching this, even though y'all don't know me yet. So hopefully somebody's watching. But my point is, they are perpetuating, or not perpetuating, but introducing this thing or welcoming it in at the same time saying, no, y'all can't do this. And I get that the rules are the rules, and what's legal is legal, and what's against the NBA bylaws and the basketball in general and NCAA, there are rules out there. But it just seems to me that there's a bit of a contradiction when it comes to that, because on one hand you're saying we welcome this in so we can make money, but at the same time you're saying but you can't make money doing the same thing that we're welcoming in. So it's a bit of a contradiction, and it puts some people in a precarious situation, especially people who are prone to that type of addiction. And sometimes you don't know that you're prone to it until it's actually happening. So who knows if, again, that was the case with these people, and we'll see more as the trials go on and more information comes out. But again, what are you thinking, Chauncey Billups? What do you think, King, Terry Rozier, and Damon Jones? What were you thinking, Tim Donaghy? And he got, he was ushered out the league, you know? So I don't think I'll have to look up to see if he ever got another sports related job, or, you know, what direction he went in after that. But, yeah, that's, I mean, it's crazy, again, to think that people with these several $1,000,000, assuming they invested properly and saved and all that stuff, would have to go to this length to satisfy whatever that urge is, unless, like I said, there's like some type of extortion going on or whatever, because that's what I thought when they started mentioning the mafia. And I ain't trying to have the mafia people come after me. I don't even know who the crime families are now. I heard that there's like still 5 or 6 of them. So y'all need to keep that over there. I ain't got nothing to do with that. So, you know, that I just think I don't agree with what they're doing or anything like that crime stuff. You know, some of them end up going into drugs and like all that kind of stuff. And I'm not, or what did they used to call it back in the day? The bookie business and all that kind of stuff. Like I mean, that's y'all over there. I like to work and earn my money and all that kind of stuff. Whatever you got y'all into that position, okay. But that, like I said, that's not me. But so I ain't trying to cross none of them. I ain't trying to have nobody with the scope outside the window or something like that. But y'all need to just leave them people alone. Let them be who they are. Let them be great. Let them be bench warmers. Let them be whatever they are, and just call it a day. Anyways, like I said, that was a little side show. This ain't a full show. I'm just doing a little mini what do you think, Keen segment. More will come on now. I'm sure I'll have another actual podcast where we discuss this a little bit. So in closing, I'd like to say thanks again for joining the Keen Intuition Show. Thanks for your support now and for any that you give in the future. And one thing I always say is, if you didn't hear it directly from me, then there's a good chance that I probably didn't actually say it. On that note, see you next time.